Tonight, it's a tough choice between, frankly, two problems here. What's making Republicans cringe more? Donald Trump dictating the terms of the next debate and a network listening? Or a party here where Paul Ryan, for some, is considered too liberal to become the next speaker? Then, Congress isn't really answering the question of what to do on gun control, so some big states are taking the lead. Are we seeing maybe a change, a tipping point in where this thing could actually go? Or will this frankly be different states, different rules? Also, our conversation with legendary former Manhattan DA Robert Morgenthau, an incredible career and a rare look at the personal life of a very private man. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This evening, we start with the debate over the rules of the next Republican debate, October 26th on CNBC. Now, frontrunners Donald Trump and Ben Carson, they've threatened, in fact, that if it is no longer, or if it's any longer than 2 hours and doesn't include opening and closing statements, well, leave it to Donald Trump to tell you what he'll do.
They want to make this an extra hour, and I think it's unfair to the viewers because it's too much to watch, and they're doing it because they want to make more money.
Now, it's hard to take Donald Trump seriously on a whole bunch of things, especially when he's complaining about someone else trying to make as much money as they can. But besides that, isn't it kind of scary when Trump and Carson are dictating the terms of the presidential campaign? And now the network, get this, they've capitulated. They caved into Trump and Carson, giving them, in effect, what they wanted. Here's something else that's a little dicey for the GOP. Paul Ryan, the guy who wants to privatize Social Security, as well as gut Medicare, Medicaid, is now considered too liberal for the right wing of the party. Now, he doesn't even appear to want the gig to be Speaker of the House. Think about that. But some on the right say that he's too far left here to even be considered seriously for the job. All right, I want to bring in our panel: Dominic Carter, political journalist, author; Scott Vanderhoff, an attorney and former 5-term Rockland County exec, 5 times, that's right, Andrew, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent and Met fan who can barely control his glee. Okay, first off, Dom, I gotta say, Trump makes sense. More than 2 hours is too long, but the idea that a network will capitulate to Ben Carson and Donald Trump, oy vey.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It is amazing what's going on. In fairness to Mr. Trump, it depends on how big, and I'm not a fan of his these days. I think he's starting to embarrass himself, even though he has a large lead in the polls. And I think it's a matter of when he's going to get out. So with that said, we do give it depends on how big the debate is, how much you want it. If you're a big enough fish in private negotiations, everything can be smoothed out. While I don't appreciate Trump as a candidate right now, he's right on this one, Richard.
I know, but Andrew, they capitulate to Trump and Carson. This is the national debate, and if you look at the numbers that they've gotten here for the first debate on Fox and the last Democrat debate on CNN, they're huge numbers. But Andrew, a network here saying, fine, you dictate the terms? I mean, I don't remember that.
Well, first of all, if you have a debate without the two front runners in the party, it's not really much of a debate, and nobody's going to tune in anyway.
Bluff, though.
You could have, but I also think it's fairly reasonable to suspect that CNBC might have gone to those rules anyway, even if Trump and Carson hadn't turned crybaby about the whole thing. I mean, the lack of an opening statement was noticeably different in the Republican debates. The Democratic debate got off to a much better start, in part because of those opening statements. And the fact that the last one that was 3 hours long, nobody could follow. And by the way, it also serves Carson and Trump because they both faded in the third hour of the last debate. So they're looking after their best interests. CNBC is looking after its best interest. I don't have that much of a problem with it.
But what does it tell you right now? On the campaign trail and back in Washington, right, where you have the likes of Trump and Carson dictating terms, and Bush and the rest just happen to be on the same stage. And back in Washington, Paul Ryan is considered too left to be taken seriously as Speaker of the House by the Freedom Caucus, but you got 30 or 40 guys who are completely off the reservation, making it impossible to govern to herd cats. Which is the one that troubles you more as a proud Republican?
Well, as a newly enrolled Democrat, I wanted to say that No, I'm just kidding. Look, first of all, I agree with Dominic and Andrew. 3 hours is just too long. It's too long to watch. You get exhausted. Having done that kind of thing, I would have demanded the same thing. On the other hand, if they begin to demand that, your point is, what else can they demand? Well, but it's CSNBC. I mean, they don't get any ratings at all. They're willing to do for the majority what they have to do.
Give them the blue M&Ms if they want, right?
Yeah. But I mean, but it is disturbing. Okay, Paul Ryan is the most knowledgeable, perhaps, politician in Washington, and he's good at what he does. And to think that he's too liberal when he's been considered the conservative voice for finances for all of these years.
And in 2012, the concern was he was too far right as a running mate. Remember that when Mitt Romney picked him to run side by side? Now he's too liberal?
That's exactly right. And Mitt Romney picked him because he was a conservative of that sort. Not only knew the finances, but was that way. So we've lost our way as a party. I've said this before on your show, Richard, that literally we've got the tail wagging the dog. It doesn't mean that the conservative views should be thrown out. But look, Paul Ryan, he won't take it. It's unlikely he will, but he's not too far left of anything.
No.
And I would venture to guess that most Republicans, even those who are not from New York, those who are far more conservative, would disagree with the concept that he's too far left.
Well, to that end, at what point does the party say, I mean, they saw Boehner driven out, right? And he made it clear on the way out, good riddance, like, let the next guy try and, deal with this clown car. But at what point do they say, wait a second, these 30 or 40 don't speak for the party? How the heck are we ever going to convince Latino voters on the issues of immigration ever vote for us? The white population is getting small in this country. This is not a plan here for at least national success. At what point does the broader party says, fine, we don't have to be moderate, let alone, even to the, you can even be to the right, but we can't be that far to the right because we can't be electable.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think what's happening now behind closed doors for the most part is trying to find a spokesperson, a new speaker who can represent that middle road, who can begin to pull these folks together and tell them behind closed doors, sit down, shut up, we've got things to do. Because quite frankly, and I know Ed Cox disagrees with this, but quite frankly, I think it hurts the presidential, whoever the nominee is, in terms of those very key votes out there. I think it's a mistake, and I think someone's got to stand up and do it. And I'm not sure Paul Ryan is or isn't the person, but the Republican Party, in my opinion, is being hurt not just by Donald Trump, but by this speaker issue.
And I think if they did it, Andrew, they'd be surprised by the reaction. I think once people realize they're marginalized, they're going to be on every dog meat committee that there will be, and they'll never be able to hold any chairmanship. Some of those 30 or 40 are going to get in line, And then how about you primary them? How about the Koch brothers put some money into primarying these freedom guys here to say, we can do better than that. Or maybe you redraw with gerrymandering some of these districts so that it's a little bit more competitive. I don't know.
But there's no way to really strong-arm the Freedom Caucus into getting into the back bench, because then the people who are more mainstream Republicans or the Peter Kings of the world, let's say, they could wind up facing challenges that are well-funded in the same level of concern that other Republicans have.
They will.
There's nobody behind the curtain who can actually make those changes.
Peter King, and you know what, we may disagree, but he'll at least speak his mind, okay? Peter King's not going to face a well-funded primary Freedom Caucus challenger that's going to beat him on Long Island. He's got nothing to worry about on that. Maybe there's another moderate here who might take him down, but not some Freedom Caucus guy.
And Peter King's been pretty vocal and has stood up to the Freedom Caucus as well as any Republican in Congress has. The problem is that you don't have a lot of Peter Kings in there. You don't have a lot of Republicans who are in relatively moderate Republican seats like there are on Long Island, as opposed to Republicans across the rest of the country.
You do have some Democrats that are in moderate seats out there, and if the Republicans have messaging that makes it hard for Democrats to vote against 20, 30 Democrats, they don't need these guys.
I don't know, Richard. I wish it were the case what you're saying, but I have to agree with Andrew on this one. I just don't see a scenario where you're going to strong arm, what do they call themselves, the Freedom
Caucus. Where else are they going to go, Tom? Where else are they going to go?
It doesn't matter them. The point that I try to make all the time with you guys is that all politics are local. You're talking about gerrymandering and so on. You get rid of them, they're going to put somebody in worse, even worse, because that's what the voters in the district want. That's the way the district has been set up, where, frankly, you have these nut jobs coming to Washington, and it's their way or the highway.
But one of those nut jobs can go on Rush Limbaugh or go on Hugh Hewitt or go on red state or go on Glenn Beck and complain about these mainstream rhinos who are shoving them to the back
and
bench.
they do it all the time.
And all of a sudden you've got an influx of money and you've got an influx of people on social media.
Yes.
And you're starting to wield that pressure against.
You brought up the subject of money, Andrew, and let's talk about money's role in the race. And every race is important here, but we've already seen how cash woes have knocked Scott Walker as well as Rick Perry out of the race. Jeb Bush, he isn't in that category. And he's still raking it in, but his campaign is starting to pare down the spending as his poll numbers keep lagging. Now, instead of private jets, it's now commercial flights or even car trips. Reports are saying some staffers getting pay cuts. Politico is saying even Hillary Clinton's finance reports show some red flags, but she isn't about to cry poverty anytime soon. Dominic, give me, you've covered a whole lot of campaigns, national, statewide, local. Give me the warning signs when you know the campaign's in some trouble here.
Excellent question. And the first indicator is when you fail to meet the game of expectations. That is the buzzword. Whenever the media reports, like Jeb Bush right now, the media is reporting, you were the guy that was supposed to scare everybody else away with your campaign war chest. And that's not happening right now, Mr. Bush. So that points to vulnerability. When the media starts, poor George Pataki, I mean, but we knew he didn't have a shot. I mean, he's basically operating on fumes right now. But when you fail to meet the game of expectations, it's not necessarily the beginning of the end, but it's a serious warning sign.
And guys won't write you checks as much, and then you start to see state operations.
Correct.
Certain states that now aren't in play anymore. Scott, you've run both obviously in Rockland, but also statewide as well here. Behind the scenes, when do you start knowing things are tough? Like when they're starting to, use both sides of the paper, when you're photocopying. I mean,
well, I've never known anything but that. So for me, it's an easy question. I mean, Dominic's right though. They're watching this too, of course. They watch, whether checks are coming in, who's willing, and of course these candidates are on the phones all the time. They're talking to the donors. They're talking to the people who are related to the donors. So they're getting the sense, and when it becomes public, of course, that puts another cold blanket on it, which makes it more difficult. And of course, this is, Hillary's taken off here on the fundraising side, where the Republicans are really getting hit. So the answer is you understand when you start calling folks and they say, "Well, I'll get back to you," kind of thing.
Andrew, it seems, maybe it's just perception, but it seems, especially since Citizens United, that if you're a Sheldon Adelson or one of these other guys, and you want to check, where it used to be a vanity thing where a presidential candidate would, come make time with you and whatever else, where do I sign? Now, they want a seat at the table. They just don't want to feel that you're giving them quality time. They want a voice on issues. Look at the Koch brothers right now. Whoever they give their blessing to, it's not just they'll write a maximum check. There's a whole lot more that will come along with it. And also expectations. Seems that people are holding back because you don't want to throw good money after bad.
Well, absolutely. And Adelson's been sort of talking to Marco Rubio lately and trying to get on board. They're trying to get their positions aligned. I wouldn't be surprised if Adelson decided to settle on Marco Rubio at this point. That's another big money endorsement and big money funder who's not going to Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is spending all of this money so far trying to raise his numbers, and he's not. He's still at 5%. Hillary Clinton's been spending a ton of money also, more than Jeb Bush has, but she's actually succeeded in continuing to separate from Bernie Sanders and keeping Joe Biden out of the race.
And where she's spending a lot of the money, to Andrew's point, Scott, and Dom, I'm curious where you guys feel in this, is she's setting up infrastructure in the states, campaign offices, as well as ground game, right? When you've been through a whole lot of races, where do you think, tried and true, whether they're local, statewide, or other, get you the biggest return on investments? Is it TV ads? Is it ground game? Where do people look back after campaign and say, man, did I blow money on that? I mean, what was the whole point of spending 50 grand on those flyers, whatever it was, versus we should have done more of that. That paid off in the long run.
Yeah. Well, it's a totally different thing, of course, for a presidential election, but I think in answer to your question, the ground game is key. And she's not focused on just Iowa and New Hampshire. She's working on that big, what date is it?
Super
the
Tuesday,
Super
yeah.
Tuesday.
Yep.
So she's got people on the ground there already doing the kinds of things. And yes, television is great and it does help, but it's got to be done at the right time. It can't be too early. You got to be, you got to hit that moment. It's like the friction point in the old, shifting of things in a car. So she's no doubt that she's spending money on staff and people out there to do things. What you don't spend it on are private jets. You don't spend it on dumb stuff, because ultimately it doesn't help you at all.
Too many consultants is just sometimes too much noise.
There's a lot of noise. You pare that down, but people on the ground, it doesn't cost a lot, but
Right.
it's critical.
For me, Dom, I always found in the cities at least, right, those buses. Now, hopefully it's not handing, coming along with envelopes when you do it, but those buses that pick up the folks from the churches and all the rest.
Yes, important.
It's less talk and it's more butts. They're rear ends in the seats and they're going to go vote here. Turnout, I always think, is the most underestimated expense, but it's got the biggest, as I said, ROI.
And that's why a lot of campaigns, at least in the past, Richard, they walk around with cash, on election day. You got to get the senior citizens, you got to get the buses. So it's very important, but you jarred my memory, and I want to go back to something that the county exec said as well. But you mentioned I've covered a lot of campaigns. So in a place like Iowa, when you have, as you well know, when you have all these campaign headquarters, a sign that you're in trouble is when they start closing. And you need those headquarters because it's all about energizing the base in the caucuses in Iowa. And I've been in this game for 30 years, and I still don't fully understand how the caucus system. I understand the formalities and so on. But it's about, so when you see the campaign headquarters start, and also a sign for me as a journalist is when they start flying commercially, as Mr. Bush is doing right now. I'm not saying you got to have a jet necessarily, a big 727 with the press corps in the back, but that's normally a sign that something's not right.
And he's driving around Iowa at this point as compared to where he was
Got a
doing.
wheelbarrow.
It's better than hitching, I guess. All right, and we'll get you involved in our conversation. So go over on Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question. Now, going back to the first thing I got into the table, if you were CNBC, would you capitulate to Trump and Carson, for that matter, and change the debate rules? Is it matter that much to get in there, to get those numbers, that you change your own rules? Okay, coming up next. When it comes to gun control, Congress, as we know, they're not doing anything, but certain states are, like California, Virginia, and New York. The question is, will we consider to see a checkerboard patterns of laws across this country, or will Washington finally act nationally? Stay with us.